Hallo miteinander, I'm Junji and this is World of Horror, a roguelike choose-your-own-adventure RPG. I was gifted this game on Christmas 2021, and I've played it very extensively since then, so much that making a video of some kind about it seemed natural. Because World of Horror is actually pretty popular by indie game standards, there's already a lot of Let's Plays and reviews of it on YouTube, so I pondered up an idea that I hope will be as unique as it will be interesting to you. We are doing a ranking of the 17 mysteries included as of version 0.9.84, otherworldly worst to cosmically best. Before that, I must make a disclaimer, as painfully formal as that may be, it has to be done. While I try to be as fair as I can and give sensible reasons, such a ranking will always be very subjective. If a mystery you particularly like places poorly, we're likely just weighing certain factors differently. Very few of the mysteries are horrifically bad anyway, most are simply horrifyingly spooky. Also, there will be spoilers to some of the mystery outcomes, as keeping this format spoiler-free would make everything sound nebulous. It may therefore not be the ideal video to watch for someone who has never even heard of World of Horror before, but it might nevertheless pique your interest in the game. That said, let's dive right in with a 17th place that I don't think will surprise anyone. It's Tranquilizing Tale of the Twilight TV Terror. This is the packed-in placeholder mystery for custom modded mysteries, and it's meant mostly as a template for modders. Because of that, there's at least a practical purpose for this case to exist, as otherwise it's not in the same league as the proper pre-existing mysteries. It's first of all pretty scarce on original artwork. Then there's also the complete absence of a boss fight. About halfway through the mystery, you'll get a special event with two options to pick. Choosing to research all through the night, the narrative announces a change in the storyline, but it's hard to pinpoint what that even is. It might be as minuscule as a small change of text in the ending, which is in and of itself the biggest weakness here. The creepy David Lynchian studio team escapes from you, there's practically no resolution to the happenings. But let's not end this on a bashing. There are positives to this case. It might just be the very easiest in the game due to its short length and lack of scripted encounters. Furthermore, since it has a modding spot on your detective board, you have the option of picking it instead of something undoubtedly harder. If you're deep in a playthrough, low on stamina, reason in the gutter, and the doom percentage sky high, Twilight TV Terror might be just what you need to squeeze out a narrow victory. Nonetheless, it's a weak case, and I'd rather have it in last place than anything more interesting. The almost as sad 16th place has its position for completely opposite reasons. Chilling Chronicle of a Crimson Cape has a pretty great scenario. An undead, murderous samurai is haunting the school bathrooms. Before his bloody deeds, he asks his victims if they'd like to have red paper or blue paper for wiping. Apart from the typical Japanese toilet cleaning you by spray, a dirty butthole would be the smallest worry of those he ultimately cuts down. Just like in the folktale this mystery is based on, the true solution is declining all his offers. When you read walkthroughs about World of Horror, many will suggest that you re-roll your set of mysteries if you see Crimson Cape among them. That's because this is a tough mystery with an unavoidable boss fight. Said boss can come in a more difficult true form if you beat the side quest, or as an easier fake if you skip it. However, the second option has you taking extra damage before the fight, so ultimately they're both quite dangerous. The mentioned side quest has another problem in that it can't be completed if you haven't selected the schoolyard within your location loadout. The school nurse or the history club might be better options for several characters, so this is not a small hindrance. It's really too bad that it's such a bad idea to have Crimson Cape as part of your run. That somewhat ruins it and puts it so low on the list. It's especially a shame because it would be a fun story to play in a vacuum, like the vacuum inside of Akamanto's face. The 15th place on this list is where it is for rather subjective reasons. I've never been a particular fan of documentary-style horror or found footage horror. They try too desperately to seem more genuine than schlocky ghost or monster horror, in my opinion. That's a big part of why freaky feature of found footage places as low as it does for me. The scenario here is almost a direct copy of the Blair Witch Project. A group of students has disappeared, and the only known clue about what could have happened to them is that they were filming a documentary. Their trail ultimately leads to the local forest, where you'll find a cabin after guessing the right event out of 12. Through the side quest, you can preemptively reduce this number to 9. 3 mysteries have this random element of either ending very soon or taking dreadfully long. It's always unpleasant. I tend to pull most of the duds before I finally get the right one. This case lacks any boss fight, but to get its best ending, you have to purchase a can of acid from the hardware store. 3 funds is quite painful to spend. It's hard to say if a boss would be worse for you, but at least you have the choice to do it. After the case, you get the tapes as an item, but that you can't really do anything with them seems like an oversight. The overall resolution to the case is also a little disappointing. No matter what you do, the students have long been devoured. Next up, we've got another one that somehow doesn't resonate much with me, but we are getting close to the territory where mysteries do more right than wrong. Number 14, Sorrowful Saga of the Moonlight Sailors, is a tale about people making catches at sea that they should better have released. Black blobs are landing in the nets of fishermen, and these sinister creatures are able to influence and even control humans. The side quest is a painful one here, as discarding 2 items tends to mean that you have to specifically buy low-cost items just for that purpose. If you oblige, you'll qualify for the better ending, but to me, both feel rather unsatisfying. What this case does well, however, is that it has significant changes for when you're playing during Timeline B, and they definitely make it more interesting. Now there is a boss to fight in an otherwise bossless scenario, the Seeping Apostle. What the side quest does now is awarding you a torch, with which you can skip the boss, or rather outright defeat it. If you found a torch in another mystery, you could also use that one, which is a nice detail. The Timeline B makes Moonlight Sailors a lot more worthwhile, but still not enough to put it higher in the rankings. I guess I just don't like seamen all that much. Taking the 13th spot is our first scenario case, as in one where you don't have the regular city interface of Shiokawa. There's a handful of these, and I usually find them pretty refreshing. Unfortunately, the recently added case, Worrying Write-Up of a Wordless Ward, is the weakest within that bunch. A semi-close friend of the protagonist is about to have surgery due to an accident, and you support them by daily visits. What's strange about the setup is that your character doesn't even seem to like the friend that much. You're mostly being pressured into the visits. The scenario is pretty straightforward. What it comes down to is about 10 or so hospital events with narrative in between. As a positive, we've got a fairly effective jump scare near the end. There's a relatively easy boss fight against the friend trying to steal your identity. Depending on which investigator you chose, they will always look slightly different, which is some good attention to detail. Even though the boss isn't too hard, they can be fled from at any point, which is the only way to get an alternate ending. I think that's the biggest weakness of the case right there. Another ending could have been possible by, for example, opening the package of the friend's mother. You would have discovered the weapon they were trying to smuggle in. That you don't even have the option to do this in a game where you're usually a snoopy detective is disappointing. It's too bad, as premise and presentation are quite good here, yet Wordless Ward is held back by its low interactivity. I've got a small post-production addendum here. Apparently you can choose to not hand the package over by storing it. Guess what? That somehow makes the boss a little stronger. Our 12th place is going to a mystery that has a lot more endings, some of which are a massive stretch to get. Bizarre Bruit of the Blood-Curdling Botanist is about finding a local gardening enthusiast that has gone missing, Shiro-san. In structure, this case is very similar to the found footage story. There's only a handful of events taking place in the city menu, then you must randomly search through up to 9 forest events until you find the winning square. You do end up locating Shiro-san live and kicking too, and what the game does for his boss fight is actually really clever. It's communicated to you that you have to protect Shiro-san from the monsters planned by shielding him from the hits with your own body, but this is not just very damaging to you. The outcome for this route is arguably the worst of the 4 available ones. Bizarre Bruit is definitely strong with imagination for its many outcomes, perhaps even too strong. The best ending requires you to not only have an item you gain from completing a different mystery, but to complete the side quest and do a very specific set of actions to kill the fungus monster with a makeshift flamethrower. It's a novelty to get once, but a big hassle otherwise, and a reason why you'd never want to have this case if you've chosen the Knight's Errant backstory. Overall, Bizarre Bruit is a tough, although exciting and clever case. It's a shame that the most practical options are either remorselessly sacrificing Shiro-san, or identifying and defeating the fungus monster in a straightforward manner. I suppose all mysteries with a random chance of picking the right icon at the end were doomed to not rank especially high, as in 11th place we've got Horrible History of Household Hell. The admittedly simple premise is that one day a whole family has disappeared from their own spacious mansion, and you're trying to find out how and why. It sounds very generic at first, but the payoff I find is a good one. The conditions for getting the best ending here are no small task to fulfill. You'll need to fetch an expendable companion from the schoolyard if you don't happen to have anyone already, and a source of light. A flashlight, a heavy-duty flashlight, or a torch will work. If it's just not feasible to follow all this, the other endings aren't too painful to get as well. So this mystery has that over Crimson Cape, for example. The clues you collect from the side quest will tell you about unusual cave formations that serve as natural concert halls. Because of this, you will need to remember a randomly generated radio frequency, which is a neat interactive touch. The last few events of this case are all from the mansion set, which is rather dangerous and even has a chance of throwing you into the other world. Luckily, the boss fight is more of an entertaining formality. Oitaru looks unbeatable on paper with its 88 hit points, but it's actually resolved in a single turn by either running away or sacrificially stabbing your unworthy companion like they're Kenny McCormick. Should you fight this encounter like any other, you will actually suffer a special game over after 3 turns, with a very gruesome death screen. If anything, Household Hell captures a Lovecraftian theme quite well, that there are powers that neither you nor anyone can simply fight. We are moving on to the 10th place and another scenario mystery. Far Out Fable of a Fear Festival takes us outside of Shiokawa to a fair that only takes place every 27 years. Before you make any assumptions, no, Pennywise the Clown is not the organizer. Apart from taking place at a questionable rhythm, nothing about the festival seems supernatural at first. Not much is drawing your character to it, except that their aunt says they have to go. Said aunt might just end up being a cult leader. Already as you start out, you can solve a special mini-quest about discovering a scandalous peeping hole at the room of the inn you're staying at. Fighting the gross, perverted innkeeper is a pretty funny outcome of said quest. He, by the way, doesn't seem to care about your chosen protagonist's gender. It's a dice roll whether he appears or not. I suppose he's just pervy by principle. Due to this mystery taking place around a festival, you've got special events, a special shop, and companion recruitment options at your disposal. All that is pretty interesting to play around with at first, until you realize that these events are risky and the companions costly. It's surprising as well that spending time with the festival activities doesn't actually get you closer to solving the mystery, as your goal, the cult's hidden factory, is only uncovered by choosing the forest events. In a way, the festival is just trying to distract you away from the better ending. It's clever at first, but for subsequent playthroughs, you're better off ignoring the additional activities. There are some impressive positives to this case. You can rest several times for a lower than normal doom penalty throughout it, and Timeline B has a special boss fight at its end that has you sending a major evil god back to the depths it came from. Overall, Fear Festival is only middling in the ranking. Had the festival activities been more sensible, it wouldn't have lost to our 9th place, Rotten Report of a Rancid Ramen. There's something very quaint about this mystery that makes me like it, despite it not being too horrifying or exciting. A new ramen shop has opened in town, and it's becoming the hottest trend for all the foodies. The noodle soup is so addicting that you're suspecting some foul play, and as it soon turns out, there's mystery meat in there. Event and ending wise, this is a fairly short and generic case. The side quest is the same as in Moonlight Sailors, so you're probably going to spend some money if you want its prize, the smelly meat. No, that's not a consumable, but your ticket to the best ending, in which you're finding out the ramen shop's true purpose. To feed eldritch creatures to the customers that can apparently stay alive in their victims despite being chopped and chewed up. It's a good thing your character can't actually have a taste. Rancid Ramen is a short, easy case that I've grown pretty fond of somehow. I think it's the lovely artwork that won me over. That ramen looks incredibly yummy to me. Okay, I would probably pick out the severed human finger and leave it, but the rest I'd suck up ravenously. Everything from now on is making it above average. Our 8th place is starting out with a most unsettling premise. Curious Case of a Contagious Coma is about a baffling illness making its victims comatose. Very little is understood about the condition, except that it's highly contagious to those who get too close to the afflicted. Of course, this isn't some new freaky COVID mutation. You quickly learn that Patient Zero dabbled in the supernatural. The boss fight here can only be reached if you use the Dust of Seeing from the side quest, but the big question will be if you want to. The Dream Devourer counts as one of the harder bosses. You can alternatively skip out on it, with the consequence that your investigator takes the mental trauma of witnessing a full hospital wing flatlining before them. The mentioned Dream Devourer has an excellently uncanny design, and the fact that it is merely an appendage of a much bigger, more horrific entity is a chilling twist. There's also a sort of unmarked middle ending, in that you can choose to sacrifice some hospital patients for extra damage on the boss. So this case is chock full of moral dilemmas. While there is some justified criticism for Contagious Coma in that it's among the tougher mysteries, I do like a lot what it's doing here. Up next is the lucky 7th place, and another case that walkthroughs will dissuade you from playing, but I can't deny it made a really good first impression on me. Spine-chilling Story of School Scissors is a scenario case that also serves as the tutorial mission for new players. It was chosen for this due to its straightforwardness, not necessarily because it's easy to survive. The objective is to lure out and defeat a demon haunting the school at night, the notorious Scissor Woman, who has a fetish for slitting the corners of her victims' mouths. Someone's a little too obsessed with Heath Ledger's Joker. The special thing about this case's side quest is that if you mess it up by not perfectly replicating an occult symbol, you'll be punished by having to fight an even stronger version of an already hard boss, for a worse ending as well. There are some entertaining point-and-click adventure elements to the locker room, and apart from the boss herself, you may be randomly assigned one of 2 unique mini-bosses. I usually end up getting the bloated swimming teacher that tries to pull students into the gym's pool. Until you've played this mystery several times, you won't know just how many variations it can have. There is a case higher in our rankings in which you can cause a fire at the same school. This will affect School Scissors in several artworks, as well as making you fight a special burnt version of the Scissor Woman. Finally, Timeline B also makes a difference, in that the boss fight is exchanged for an exorcism minigame. So, while I admit that this case has issues, for example in that you must always fight the very formidable Scissor Woman, I've got to be honest, it's a very well made and exciting one, with some great designs. It's just that it's a bad idea to play if your character isn't well equipped for combat yet. Unlike our previous entry, our 6th place is sensible to play early in a run. Alarming account of abnormal arms sounds very grim right from the get-go. A murder has taken place at your own apartment complex, and it has quickly turned into a cold case. Soon, you get an epiphany that the police never had: the building's ventilation system. Halfway through the case, there are signs that there is a naughty pervert loose, likely the killer. Most of the events you'll be going through will be of the apartment set, which only has few very devious ones, except for its ghost encounter and a slightly heightened chance of attracting the super boss, something truly evil. A real positive about Abnormal Arms is that it's an excuse to look at some BAPs, glorious honkers in 2-bit graphics. I swear this didn't gain the mystery too many spots in this ranking. I'm not as bad as the pervy villain of it, honest. Anyway, the reason you should play this one early is because you will receive a tiny key at the end, along with the discovery of the perverted janitor's centipede-infested corpse. It's a pretty gruesome surprise, and the case's highlight for sure. The mentioned key will either get you a sports rifle during the school scissors mystery, or a goblet from a school event, which can potentially hold the best healing item of the game. All of what I just said is only relevant for Timeline A. As for Timeline B, the whole case turns out differently. Then our pervert is still very much alive and has to be fought as a pretty strong boss, although one with monstrously good design. Winning against him will leave you a little unenthusiastic too, as you don't even get that tiny key for this new ending. I guess it figures. Timeline B is meant to be a little more punishing. Abnormal Arms finds an interesting balance between unsettlingly grim and quirkily cartoonish, as few killers will have Stretch Armstrong powers. Not many mysteries in World of Horror actually reflect that it's set in the 80s. Our 5th place gets extra bonus points for cleverly considering its era. Bloody Brief of a Beckoning Bulletin is about several people being found dead after utilizing those newfangled BBSs, the early instances of the internet forums of today. A lot of time in this mystery is spent simply setting up your computer and connection, which really captures how much of a novel experiment it was to go online back then. The narrative of the mystery is pretty good, as the deaths are growing more frequent and you're even interviewing an obsessed survivor. The finale is even more intriguing, as you communicate with an apparently sentient data demon. Choices must be picked wisely, and with a completed side quest, you can convince the demon into giving up on its plans to spirit all of humanity away into its data realm. The dialogue tree is quite interesting here. Wrong options will lead to a battle with the demon, now called Together, sometimes even with extra damage on you beforehand. The idea that you're wrestling with your router trying not to be strangled by its cord is pretty amusing. The boss fight is only semi-difficult, but the pacifist route is still preferable. There's a lot of effort in Beckoning Bulletin, and the fact that it encapsulates the widespread superstition about new, untested technology so well makes me appreciate it. We've arrived at the mystery that fell just short of the podium. In sports, 4th place will always be an ungrateful position, but Perilous Parable of the Peculiar Painting is really good all around. It's another scenario mystery, and would be the second best if you filtered by those. Your character has been fanboying or fangirling over the renowned painter Ichiro-san, who has invited you to his mansion to be the first to view his magnum opus. Once at the location, Ichiro is making himself scarce. Long before you find him, you run into a recruitable companion, Aimi, another invitee. The case revolves a lot around Aimi, in that you're not supposed to abandon her during your investigation. Should you get separated twice in a row, you'll automatically be locked into the worst ending and punished with a boss fight to boot. A reason why playing peculiar painting is attractive is that as long as you bring a light source, you can get a chainsaw during one of the events. This is the only way to get this weapon, and it is a mighty one, so long as your strength stat is even remotely decent. It comes out of gas, unfortunately, so you'll have to buy some from the hardware store in your next mystery, but once you do, hail to the king, baby! As soon as your adventure date concludes, Ichiro will ask you to leave him and Aimi in private for a while. This is the big ending split for this case, and it's quite a moral and strategic dilemma. Comply, and you'll solve the mystery without a boss fight, yet Aimi gets devoured by a painted monster. Heroically refusing makes you battle said very powerful monster for the best ending, while also recruiting Aimi for the remainder of the playthrough. I have a soft spot for mysteries about defending your friends, and this one makes the decision to do so a genuinely meaningful one, as it is so difficult to make. It is time we hand out the bronze medal, and the lucky mystery we're giving it to continues the theme of companionship from the previous one. Eerie episode of Evolving Eels is a case walkthroughs will tell you to start a run with, and that's sensible advice. In it, you and your neighbor Kana are spying on an especially creepy apartment tenant who's obsessed with fish. While your mission sounds questionable, the end justifies the means here, as you're both onto something sinister. The atmosphere of Eerie episode is actually refreshingly lofty. For a long time, you and your buddy Kana are playfully Scooby-Dooing around town. Only when Kana goes missing near the end are the stakes suddenly high. It's an excellent ploy to raise tension. Difficulty-wise, this is one of the easiest cases in the game, with positive payoff for the intended completion. Keeping Kana alive through the best ending will reward you with them as a recruited companion, and the damage reduction by one they bring is an excellent bonus, which you'll be thankful for the whole playthrough. Finally, the scene to save Kana is one of the most intimidatingly repugnant moments in the whole game. Adding really great artwork and the excellently spunky personality of Kana, I'm sure most of you expected Eerie episode to rank among the best mysteries, but there are still some that I like even better. You know how psychologists say that silver medals make people less happy than bronze? Since stories in a video game aren't people, we are thankfully not affected by this line of thinking and can thoroughly celebrate macabre memoir of morbid mermaids. There are once again students reported missing in Shiokawa. This time, all the victims have in common that they are female and part of the school's swimming team. The game is not really stealthy about its twist, revealing to us in the intro that the school's janitor is trying to sew together his very own mermaid. This, however, does not harm the case much, next to the many things it gets right. The narrative throughout the mystery is excellent, and your options to conclude it plentiful. Morbid Mermaids is not exactly an easy case, as it has a few events that will always sap stamina and reason from you, yet you have a lot of freedom in how to handle the boss and whether you want to fight him at all. The best ending, as well as a decent weapon, is awarded by simply killing the mad janitor in combat. He's a medium challenge compared to other bosses, but if that's still too much, you could use a crowbar to free one of his vengeful previous victims from a manhole for another ending. An amusingly nuclear option has to be outright ending the encounter by starting a fire at the school. This is, by the way, how you can affect the location of the school scissors mystery. Lastly, there are two other ways of skipping the boss fight, either by having an Innsmouth curse on you, or by befriending the janitor when you're playing during Timeline B. Overall, it's an incredibly content-rich mystery, one of the grimmest World of Horror has to offer, with excellent artwork to see. You should not miss out on exploring all 5 endings for yourself. So at long last, we're giving out the gold medal. If you know all mysteries by heart, you'll know the one that remains. I've got to wonder if only I have a particular soft spot for it, or if folks expected it to do well. If this were done by poll, I think Eerie Episode would win thanks to Kana, but I crown Vicious Verses of a Violent Vigil. A suspiciously obscure granduncle of the protagonist has passed away, and his family members are holding a nightly vigil in his honor. Out of piety, you're of course taking part as well. The folks you will meet there are 2 of the 3 following: the opportunistic Akane, a scarred yakuza named Sotomura, and the author Hawado with his tag-along wife. They are all completely unknown to you, making the vigil seem like a potential scam, but it gets much worse than that. Throughout the case, you must follow the instructions of a vigil pamphlet, or else you'll fall onto the path of the worst ending, which also means you'll have to fight the now hostile and cursed guests. These new enemies have some of the scariest designs in the game. It's too bad that encountering them is in essence a punishment. Of the scenario cases, this is likely the only suitable one to start a playthrough with, as you're always given a free weapon, the Meat Cleaver. Violent Vigil isn't seen as a difficult case. While you're once again exposed to mansion events, there aren't that many to live through. The bigger challenge comes from studying the pamphlet properly. Only then can you face the resurrected granduncle, who is only raising your doom level through his attacks, and therefore counts as a rather harmless boss in most cases. There is the possibility of sacrificing a surviving guest during the fight for a middling ending, but I think that's rarely worth it. What I like most about Violent Vigil is its setting. At first, it's just the cliché of a diverse group being trapped in a haunted house. It turns out it's not something as tame as ghosts. At the finale, the whole house transports itself to the other world, the realm of cosmic horrors. Early on in my time with World of Horror, I rolled this case a lot, so it quickly became a sort of familiar classic to me. There are some random variations in the pamphlet instructions, and in which guests show up, so the replay value for this one is pleasantly high. And that concludes our ranking. Did my picks match the overall consensus? Or were you completely baffled by some placements? Since I haven't found similar discussions, I'm interested in opinions. Don't be shy to comment yours. World of Horror hasn't left early access yet, even though a version 0.9.84 sounds almost complete. There is still a chance that new mysteries will arrive. Hopefully an update will come within the next 2 years. That would be within the track record of this game, but surely before Athiolash the Towering Eye devours our planet. Nevertheless, I've already had a great time with World of Horror. It's starting to become my favorite roguelike. Not including roguelites, not only is the competition too fierce there, but there arguably aren't roguelite elements in it, so why compare? Maybe I like it as much because there's nothing except achievements carrying over. You just start a playthrough, it lasts 45 minutes, and you either save the world or it goes under. There's beauty in that. And with that, I've said pretty much everything I could think of saying. I'm Gishity6, this was my second longest video I've ever published, and it was about a little gem that is worth all that time, called World of Horror. Bis bald!